Amazing. Okay, we're gonna start off by introducing ourselves. If you've been here all day, I'm going to say sorry for the amount of introductions I've had to do. But my name is Karina Duffy. I am the Self-Healing Communities Coordinator. I am a recent grad from the University of Notre Dame. I studied neuroscience and theology, and I have been working with self-healing communities since my sophomore year, so about 3 years now, and I've adored all the work and I've adored today. It's been so much fun. It's been kind of crazy to see this, like the time go by out my window. It's pitch black now, so we've really been through it today, and it's awesome. And I'm really excited about this particular presentation. Miss Jane.
Okay, I can go next. I also apologize for the repeated introductions, but my name is Jane Caulfield. I graduated in May also, so a recent grad as well. I studied neuroscience and behavior, and I started working with self-healing communities around December-ish, so it hasn't even been a year, but I feel so fortunate to be a part of the work. It has been so impactful in my life. And yeah, I'm really excited to share this presentation. It's one of my favorites. So
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Tahira. I'm a senior at Notre Dame right now, and I'm studying neuroscience and minoring in studio art. I'm a near P fellow, and I've been working with self-healing communities for about a year now, but it's felt like a lifetime, a good one, just because the team's so awesome, and I feel like I've learned a lot of valuable things. And I'm also an illustrator for self-healing communities, and that has definitely been one of my favorite parts to just be able to express myself in a way that I love. So
And I just want to shout out Tahira too. Tahira takes a lot of the ideas that we have and just makes them real. Like I'll send her a graphic. I'm like, can you illustrate this? And she gets it back quick too, and beautiful. So just want to say thank you to Tahira for all your amazing illustrations that you do for us. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro again into who Self-Healing Communities is. So the Self-Healing Community of Greater Michiana's mission is to nurture personal and community well-being through the understanding of the neuroscience of human resilience and the celebration of our collective strengths. And our vision is to increase protective factors throughout the region, especially 1 to 2 caring adults in every person's life. And this is really important because in the original research, it just showed that even doesn't matter what factors you have going on, if you have 2 or more people to rely on, you are 94% less likely to report being depressed, 65% less likely to go hungry. So it really just showcases the importance of having meaningful relationships that you can turn to. And that's a huge part of our work, is trying to increase the amount of these relationships that people have. And our goal is to teach everyone in our community to care for themselves and each other in a way that prioritizes caring for the nervous system. And so this presentation is in line with this goal, so you can better understand what goes on during childhood and adolescence, and hopefully that can help you care for yourself a little bit better, care for your story a little bit better, and the people who you engage with. So the 3 main domains of our self-healing communities movement is to increase protective factors, and protective factors are a thing in a person's life that buffer from the effects of toxic stress on the system. And these are done through investing in high quality, not only high quality adult-child relationships, but also high quality adult-adult relationships, because we never outgrow our need for meaningful relationships and meaningful connection. The second domain is building resilience, and we do this through the understanding of near peace science, which are the fields of neuroscience, epigenetics, adverse childhood experiences, resilience, and positive childhood experiences / protective factors. And then the third domain is supporting community engagement by bringing people together to celebrate each other and provide positive experiences and resources for community members. So we're going to walk through why the child and teen years are so critical and what are the key characteristics of both stages of development. Because a lot of the time childhood gets a lot of credit or a lot of interest, but adolescence is equally as important, but it's a little bit different. And so we're excited to share with you, especially about the teen years. And this is all important because Velshana always likes to say that when you meet a human being, you don't really, the first thing you don't think about is that the fact that they have a nervous system and endocrine system, that these systems are all inside of us and they're always operating all of the time. And they're responding to our environment. And these systems are very complex and they're largely shaped by our development. So as a child, these systems are really forming. And like I said, they're really complex. And so when we study these systems, they get broken down into and compartmentalized so we can better understand them. And so then we think about the nervous system being separated into the peripheral and the central nervous system, and the peripheral being broken down into the autonomic and somatic nervous system, and the autonomic being broken down into the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Man, tongue twister words. And we study them in isolation, but in reality, they're always communicating with one another. They're always operating, and they're always, always, always responding to the environment and aware of the environment. And this is really important in thinking about childhood development because those systems are all built during development. And so, Tahira.
Yes. So just bouncing off of what Karina said about like all the systems that we have as humans, I think it's also important to kind of establish that we have a specific genetic code, just like in our DNA, that gives all humans a basic map of the brain of like different regions. For example, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, just all structures to make like our brains function as humans. And we all have that like general map. But the most important thing about this general map is the fact that our experiences, especially during development or any critical period that we have, fine tune like the details for our brain map and just how we interact with the world, how we build relationships, and how we go forward during development, but also like it makes that framework and carries out into our adulthood as well. So that's why it's so important.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add to that too, like these, while we have the same, like Tahira said, the same area, all of our prefrontal cortex are in the same spot in the brain. All our amygdalas are pretty much in the same area. But what makes us unique is the fact that these connections between brain regions are different, and our experiences shape how these regions communicate with one another.
And kind of just going into the more neural aspect. So these are pictures of neurons for A, B, and C. So A is at birth, and you can see at B, it says 3 months of age. So you can see like the synaptic connections or the connections between these neurons forming, which is why we kind of relate it to a map because it just looks so complex and there's a lot of things going on there. So these are the neural connections and roads that kind of are strengthened or weakened as we develop and form this framework just for life and how we're going to interact going forward. So during childhood, the foundational plan of our maps are developed. Different experiences either strengthen, weaken, or grow new connections, like I mentioned in the previous slide, in the brain. So our roads are being formed by each experience. So I think these experiences can be both positive or negative. So it's really important to have a good, solid foundation. And that's why for example, soft touch, a soothing voice is so important developmentally for like a child or somebody growing up, because we need a certain serve and return where we need like during that critical period, we need affection, we need attention from those supporting adults, or just like kind of those protective factors that we're establishing growing up, so we can carry that with us as we experience the world and just continue growing. So all these connections ultimately make up the map inside our brains. As we mentioned before, that general map that DNA codes for kind of gets fine-tuned, and then develops further. So this map built through our own unique experience is the only thing we have to tell us how to engage with the world. Our brains adapt to our situations based on continuous exposure to certain environments. Every time we experience something, a road in our brain, a neural connection is strengthened. If we never have expected experiences like love, forgiveness, or emotional regulation, those roads never get built. So one example that our team likes to use a lot is like thinking of a marble going through sand. So if you have a certain practice that you institute in your life or a certain routine, for example, going to the gym regularly on Sunday. So this marble that you have, this experience of going to the gym, you let it run through the sand the first time. There's like a bit of engravement, but it's not very strong. But then as this routine develops and you keep going and you keep going to the gym on the specific day, that marble keeps going through the sand, keeps having that pathway strengthened. And that's kind of how we can look at neural connections in the brain.
And just to emphasize on that point of, if we don't ever experience certain exposures, we won't ever have those connections in the brain. So the last sentence on here, to that, with that marble analogy that I love that you used to hear, is that if I've never experienced love, or if I've never experienced a safe space or someone that sees me, my brain does not have the neural connection to know what safety is or to know what love is. It's only going to know what it's experienced. And that's why this period is so critical to expose human beings to experiences such as love and care and safety, so that they have the foundational map to know what these things are for the rest of their life.
So again, just coming back to the fact that everybody has a brain that has a unique combination of how you interacted with the world, how others interacted with you growing up during development. And again, just making that framework, because everybody has their own way of developing that kind of concretely formed at that time. Yes.
And I just want to add to this too, that something that Dr. Michael likes to say is that we never grow out of our brains. We have our brains from being a little baby infant till the time we pass away from this life. And so our brains stay with us, and our brains, all of our experiences get stored in there. And sometimes we're unaware of how our brain, like the information that's getting stored in our brains. And it takes self-awareness to be able to understand, oh, that happened in my childhood, and that's why I act in this way. A story I always like to tell, and my mom is on this call, so hi mom, but is that growing up, my mom loves the house being very clean. And whenever I would cook or be in the kitchen, she doesn't like crumbs on the table. And so I would always have to clean up the crumbs, or else I would get scolded and get yelled at, and get in trouble. And when I would go to other friends' houses, I would get really anxious. I would get really stressed out if there were crumbs on the table, and my heart rate would go up and my hands would get sweaty. And I wasn't going to get in trouble at their house if I had crumbs on their table. And I would always, I realized I would think, like, why the heck am I freaking out that I'm going to get in trouble? And it didn't take until recently to realize that, like, my body was storing this reaction because of the fact that my mama would yell at me if I had the crumbs on the table. And so it really took getting to be aware and getting to know that, oh, okay, this is why I get nervous at other people's houses. And that was an experience during childhood that got stored in my behavior. So
I also just kind of want to emphasize like that serve and return aspect, because I'm sure like all of you have heard the aspect that you're supposed to talk to your babies, you're supposed to interact with them, like have your attention on them fully, because without that, there's certain things that just aren't being developed, and I think that's just really important to point on. And yeah.
awesome. So with childhood, a big part that Tahira got to talk about is that it's really characterized by these building of new roads, these strengthening of connections, and making all of these different connections with different brain cells. But then during the teenage years, a key characteristic is that those roads get either stronger, some roads fade away, and this is done through this process called pruning. And so Jane is going to walk us through this.
Okay, yeah. So during childhood, there is so many wonderful things going on, so much growth and development, but development is in no way done by the time you come to your teenage years. There is a lot of change that is also happening, but the change is in a different way. So while in childhood, you are building so many different connections based off your experience, in the teenage years, you are actually trying to figure out how to adapt your brain to make it the most efficient that it can be, so you are able to best walk through the world for the rest of your life. So one of the processes that is essential in this is called pruning, as Karina had introduced, and as the name suggests, just how we prune trees or plants that have like a dead branch, we are cutting away the connections that we are no longer using. And again, this helps us to make the connections that we do keep more efficient. So there's so much change going on, and as we are trying to figure out the best way to navigate the world, the best connections that we need, our brain is going through different areas of expansion and contraction. And we're going to get a little neuroscience-y here, but I hope you find it pretty cool. I do, at least. But there are different areas of the brain that have different functions. And these go through different cycles of growth and pruning as well. So we're going to start with the amygdala. This is an almond-shaped structure. It's highlighted on the brain, but right in here, yeah, right there. And it is involved with processing emotions and fear. And during adolescence, it is actually building a lot of new connections and growing in size. So the reason why in adolescence it grows in size is because of the exposure to new peer interactions and new social settings. And the brain needs to label these settings with emotions and give them emotional saliency. So in the teenage years, there's a large increase in peer interactions. And I think this is pretty cool. Teenagers are actually drawn to peers and want to expand their social circle for an evolutionary reason. When you become a teenager, you start thinking about reproduction, and you do not want to reproduce with your family. That is not a positive choice evolutionarily. So this is why teenagers are so drawn to other peers and expanding that social circle, and why the amygdala is growing so much.
Nice.
Okay, and then the prefrontal cortex. So that's the area that's right up here, and it is involved with executive function. It helps us to plan and think rationally. It also plays an important role in regulation. So it regulates other areas of the brain. If we take the amygdala, that emotion center that we were talking about in the last slide, it plays an important role in regulating that. So when the amygdala is firing a lot, there's a lot of emotion, the prefrontal cortex is able to say, hey, it's okay, calm down. So yeah, it plays a really important role in regulating other areas of the brain. And during adolescence, it is actually getting pruned a lot. So this is making it more effective, and it's figuring out which connections it needs and strengthening those connections. So there's actually a big mismatch in the development of the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, and this helps us to understand some of the behavior that adolescents present with. So as I said previously, the prefrontal cortex has a regulatory role for the amygdala. It helps to calm it down when it is firing a lot. And the prefrontal cortex is actually one of the last areas of the brain to develop. I think it's around 25, and the amygdala matures much quicker and is done much quicker. So there's a mismatch between the level of development of the two areas of the brain. The amygdala comes on board much faster, much stronger. So the prefrontal cortex isn't able to regulate it in the way that it does when our brain is fully mature. And this helps to explain some of the emotions that teenagers often have. We often think they are driven by their emotions and aren't logically thinking, but there's actually really a physiological reason behind all of this. It's not their fault. Okay, and sorry, I'm recovering from a cold, but another process that is really important that is happening a lot during adolescence is called an increase in white matter or myelin. So what is white matter and myelin? So this is a neuron, the yellow structure, and myelin or white matter is the blue substance that is, that Karina is pointing at right now. It is this white insulating substance. And what white matter does is it helps to make this neural firing a lot quicker. So if we think of the road analogy that Tahira and Karina were talking about earlier, these are highways. They are newly paved. There are no stop signs, so it's super quick. And that's what myelin does to this neural firing. And during adolescence, there's actually a huge, huge increase in this white matter. And what it does is it makes the connections that the brain does decide, okay, this is important. I need to keep this. I use this a lot. It makes these more efficient and strengthens them and makes them faster.
Amazing. So childhood and adolescence are so important, as Tahira and Jane are talking about, because they really shape the foundation of our brain map, which influences the way we walk through and engage with one another. We only have our brains help us do everything, and our brains are being shaped by our early environments, being shaped by our current environments, and they're the only thing we have to help us perceive and engage with the world. And these developmental periods are just so important because they are what we show up as. They influence how we show up as, who we show up as. And this is one of our very, very favorite quotes by Dr. Michael. And she says that everyone's unique experience contributes to their unique map. And you never know what someone else's is until they share it with you. We don't know what people are going through. We don't know what people have gone through. Like at the beginning, I referred to how Valshana says you never really think about people's nervous systems or endocrine systems when you meet them, but we all have them, and we've all have our own stories that are stored in our nervous and endocrine systems. And we won't ever know our own map, our own stories, if we don't take the time to get to know ourselves and learn from ourselves. But then we also don't know each other's maps and each other's stories until we take the time to sit down and really listen. And the importance of listening to know. And so with that, every act of compassion and kindness and grace extended to another person can help heal and protect the brain. And every positive act creates a healthy and resilient brain map. Positive interactions and experiences are required to form a flourishing brain, like the image of the marble going down the sandhill. If we've never experienced kindness, grace, compassion, that marble is not going to roll down that sandhill. That neuron is not going to, that connection is not going to be formed. But if I do experience an act of compassion, an act of kindness, that neuron starts to get formed. If you were here at the neuroscience and resilience presentation, Jane talked about dendritic spines, these little spines on the brain cell that change in response to our environment when we learn something new. If I have this experience of kindness and grace and compassion, my brain is going to change, and it's going to change for the better. And so again, we don't know what people are going through And that's why it is so important to act in this way, because through this, we can have a healing and healthy society. So thank you so much. And we'll take any questions.
Dr. Michael, are you still on the call?
Yes.
Okay, just in case, this question might require a little bit of your attention, but I just wanted you to be listening to it. But we're going to give the ladies an opportunity first, okay? So the question is, there's two parts. So the amygdala is growing, and then it's what the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. So what if somebody starts using substance abuse during that time? Is the brain damaged, or is it killing off brain cells that can have a lasting impact?
That feels like a better question for Dr. Michael than the
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So substance use becomes reinforcing not because of either of those structures, right? Substance use becomes reinforcing. The draw to substance use, individuals become more vulnerable to the reinforcement of substance use, often because we're not getting the stuff that our nervous systems expect. But the vulnerability of substance use doesn't have anything to do with the amygdala or the prefrontal cortex. It has to do with the way that substances activate kind of reinforcement learning systems in the brain, and displace them. So they activate those reinforcement systems in a really, really strong and artificial kind of way, and making it harder for other kind of, I don't know, normative behavioral things to be able to feel the same way. Does that bring?
So what are brain cells being killed? Like I'm assuming that if this person is sending this question, there may be a concern about a younger person who is having substance abuse, and how is this impacting the development of them, and from the perspective of protective factors, or the person, the older adult, what could be done and what awareness can be helpful?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to recognize substance use is hard. In my immediate family, right, like grew up with a lot of substance use, and it's hard. And it's hard. So brain damage, I mean, sure, right? So, but not, not in a single use. I mean, I guess I'm stuttering because there are so many details of it, right? So like dosage matters, right? Is it recreational marijuana use, or is it heroin, or is it cocaine, right? All of those things will impact the effect on the central nervous system. So the trust that's needed to be able to ask those questions would be an important thing to be able to support a young person who is using substances. Kind of questions around like why. I know the people in my life who have used substances to the extreme, it's been driven by largely loneliness and self-loathing. Kind of like the theme of the day and why we do this work is that the nervous system is expectant of consistent love and support, accountability, embracing, right? The restorative justice practices that were brought up earlier, right? That like you can be held accountable and still feel loved, right? We need to be held accountable and still be part of our communities. When we're met with nothing but punishment, it does more damage. So what about the young person's experience might be making them, right? What about the young person's experience allowed them or indicated to their nervous system to be able to consolidate that, like, that they weren't loved, right? That if a caregiver is absent, if a caregiver is distracted, if a caregiver is depressed, those are all ways in which they're not intentional harms to a child, but are all ways in which the expectations are not met. And then again, from a kiddo and from a developmental perspective, kind of the only option that brain has is like, when I ask for something, nobody loves me back. And so then we have to like problem solve it. Well, then the only conclusion that a young child can draw often is that I am not lovable. Which in my experience has been the root cause of the vast majority of substance use that I have ever experienced, and all of the people that I have known that have ever used substances. And but then substance use itself activates neural circuits that reinforce the behavior in really, right? So you have a kiddo or a nervous system. Am I too soapboxy right now? Or is this good?
No, and I just want to make sure people are acknowledging that, and I know Tahira, we're going to let you say something, but understand that the question came out of what we were teaching around the brain, but it goes into much bigger. And that's what Dr. Michael is explaining, that that's why self-healing communities is that whole picture, you know? And so, no, I don't think you are. I think this is really helpful, because sometimes we have a problem, we want a quick answer. And this is validating. It is deeply complicated. And I love that you brought out about the loneliness and all of the other pieces. Can we see what Tahira is wanting to add?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to mention that I took psychology of addiction, I think last year. And one of the key takeaways I took from that, just like as a minority, is that this has nothing to do with like death of cells per se, but just something that I thought was important. It's just like you have a specific genetic vulnerability. And I think that kind of taking that aspect and bringing it to the community, as you said, and just being aware, like, and having like a trauma informed sense that can also help when dealing with stuff like addiction, because you really don't know like how easy it is for like somebody who's a teen or somebody who's developing to like get addicted just because they're genetically vulnerable more than like other individuals. So that might be something to like possibly mention or like look into. Yeah.
And the grace that you have to have for yourself in that situation, you know? Nancy, there's a couple of questions and then there's a hand raised. So Nancy, did you have any last thing you wanted to say with that?
No, I can be good. Yeah.
Okay. There's a question, Nancy or the team, if you all can read that question, and then we'll go. Tyler, your hand is raised. You can unmute.
Yeah, okay. Oh, great. You'll take my question now, or do you want to answer the questions in the chat first?
Well, we'll take your question while they're reading. The team is reading it. Dr. Michael and I would listen.
Okay, great.
Hello, so good to see y'all faces.
It's good to see you too. Thank you for putting this on. This is great. Yeah. So my question is, assuming that these neural pathways can continue to be built during adulthood, what's the difference between the way that the pathways are built during childhood and adolescence versus adulthood, right? Like, are they being created slower? Are they weaker? Do they just take longer to develop in the adult brain versus the child's brain or the adolescent brain? So that's my question. Yeah.
That's a great question. I love that question. It's the difference between building the pathways from like in very simplistic, right? It's always a little bit more complicated, but like the way that I think it's really easy to understand is that it's the difference between building them from bottom up versus top down.
Okay.
Right? That like all these different parts of the brain are interconnected in some way, but the number of steps between the prefrontal cortex these brainstem structures. So there's a part of the brainstem called the solitary nucleus that is kind of the stress response node way down deep in the brainstem. And that's one of those kind of more senior places at the time of birth, because it helps regulate, helps understand the broader environment, helps regulate heart rate and blood pressure, activate endocrine systems, things like that. When we're little, it's our caregivers that help build us from the bottom up through all of this kind of sensory outside of ourselves stuff, because we don't have the cognitive systems on board yet.
Sure.
Repair is always possible, right? We're right from a self-healing community's perspective, self-healing is always possible, but it becomes top down. And then it's just about the intention and attention and persistence, because our intention can talk to eventually, right? That solitary nucleus. It just has a lot of steps to go to, right? If we get affectionate touch early on in development, that affectionate touch gets right in there, like in just a couple of hops, right? Like 2 hops from our skin, we get to our solitary nucleus, but it might be like 13 hops from the prefrontal cortex down to build the structures that are necessary across the brain. Is that a reasonable?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming that those pathways can get stronger and stronger, right? Like white matter
Absolutely.
reinforces
Absolutely.
patterns. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's one of the greatest hopes, is that plasticity is possible across a lifespan.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Ladies, did you get a chance to read the
Yep.
question?
You want me to read it out loud and then answer, or is it?
You can just, however you want to work it.
I'll just read the question out loud. I think it might be helpful. In this universe of virtual interaction, social media, etc., curious of the group's view on both the positive virtual connections, building communities, and harm, online abuse, promotion of isolation, the current media info environment have in this context, good, bad, complex. I have some thoughts, but I don't know if Jane or Tahira or Dr. Michael want to go.
You go, and then Tahira and Jane can hop in.
I think, like anything, these things are always complex, but where my mind goes is that Dr. Michael talks about how we were made for the 3D world. We're not made, our brains weren't developed to interact in the 2D. So we need like touch. We need to be able to be in the physical presence of other people. Like our brains have evolved to need that kind of interaction. And yeah, so when you're interacting with another and you're trying to build true connection with another human being, it's necessary, like a critical component is being in their physical presence to get the nuance of the human behavior that you can only have in real life. But there is a good in having the virtual sphere, in the sense that, sure, building connection, building communities are also things we've talked about today as being a need for the human nervous system, being a good for the human nervous system. And so, and some people do have to live in complete isolation for whatever reason for a period of time. And having access to FaceTime a grandparent or FaceTime a friend can be the stabilizing force for them, can be a very good aspect in their life. And this is where tech can be very beneficial, but it becomes harmful when that becomes the replacement for interactions in real life, because we need that in-person interaction. That's my response to that. I don't know, Jane and Tahira.
I like, I've been hearing this a lot today, and other things that Dr. Michael and all of you all have talked about is time and duration of exposure is critical with this one. You know, one of the things, having had the opportunity to listen when Dr. Marty Teicher, am I saying that correct, was here, and I sat in on a couple of classes, and that critical piece of something happening at this age versus when you're older, the impact that it has on you and your brain and nervous system. And, you know, I always think about the ability to have coping strategies, knowing what safety is, having an alarm go off inside of you that I've been home too long. I've been by myself too long. I've only talked to people on the phone like too long. And so I think the interesting thing is with this, what the pandemic has done in some ways, we sent a message that there is safety in isolation and the outer world is dangerous. And we're having to, you know, try to combat some of this fear that was put in to help people understand that this connection in lots of different ways. And I think we live in such a high technology world that people have marketed, they made money off of it, and they're sharing a message that is very confusing for individuals. And so I think that's the complex piece of it all. Nancy?
If I could just say one last thing, I am sensitive to time. That again, back to the timing and duration, right? That young brains have not developed the necessary architecture that they need to engage in a world the way that culturally we expect grown-ups to behave. And so when we displace, kind of back to the species expectant experiences, the external environment is providing the pressure that sculpts the architecture. And so for a grown-up brain that had all of these multisensory experiences, right? Because anybody over 40 on this phone call, over 30 on this phone call, grew up in the absence of all this tech. So the only option our brain has to think about it is from the context of a brain that was formed in a multisensory environment and engaging with the tech. We are now sculpting brains. We're displacing this multimodal sensory world that the brain expects. We're substituting two-dimensional visual rapid stimulation and expecting that to be sufficient. And so the question really becomes then, is it, right? I mean, the American American Pediatric Association is very clear, right? No screen time before the age of 2, right? Because the literature base has the evidence in place, right? So again, duration, the way that grown-up brains understand technology is completely different than the way that young brains understand technology. And young brains are in critical periods of development, and their perception, influence, integration, processing is obligated to be critically influenced by the sensory world around them. And so the question really is about like how does this complete pivot in sensory environment shift the development of the young brain? And that's an outstanding question, because we'll just have to watch this generation, see how they go.
And my last thing is, Dr. Micah really was upset when we had such long isolation time for younger kids, and I couldn't understand it. And it took a lot of conversation, a lot of her helping me understand what she just said about like, they need this interaction, this connection, this, yeah, so great question. And appreciate the dialogue, all of the questions. Thank you so much. We are about to dive into, I'll let you go ahead, Miss Karina.
Oh, yes, we have 2 more sessions. Oh my goodness, how did it get to the end of the day? Crazy. And our next session is Handcrafts in the Brain, which Jane is going to present on. I love this presentation and I'm so excited. So hopefully you guys can stay on and hear about how handcrafts can be good for our brains. And I'm going to stop sharing so Jane can start sharing.
Yes, and one of the things that I appreciate about this presentation is that if you are somebody who is like, oh, I want to learn how to crochet or all these different things, or are a puzzler. All right.
I had to do an outfit change.
Yes. So excited. So it's just really just a fun time. So again, if you're one of those people, or you know people who crochet and do all these different things, or are knitters and sewers, ask them to join this call. And thank you, Jane, for your contribution. And please, I know you already introduced yourself, just do it again for all the wonderful new voices, new people who are here.
Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, I am so excited about this presentation. My name is Jane Caulfield. I am a near-P science intern. I graduated in May from Notre Dame in neuroscience and behavior, and I started working with self-healing communities in December, but it feels like a lifetime ago. So I am so excited about this presentation. They say save the best for last. So handcrafts are a huge love of mine. I love to knit, and I also love neuroscience. So this is really an integration of my two loves. So I'm really excited to share this with you all. So handcrafts actually came up my very first time I met Velshana in the interview for this job. I thought the interview was going pretty well, and then Velshana was like, okay, I have one more question for you. How do you deal with stress? And I was like, whew, okay, easy question. I got this. Knitting. So I love knitting so much. I knit all the time. I started when I was quite young. My mom and my grandma, who I believe are both on this call, they taught me quite young. They are both avid knitters, but it wasn't really until COVID that I really got into it. I felt that it helped me to navigate all the stresses of the pandemic. And then when life went back to normal, I continued to knit, and knitting has been so impactful in how I deal with stress. Being a student, I also was on the Notre Dame fencing team, and I also compete on the Canadian national team. And this year I'm working towards Olympic qualification. So sometimes my life is crazy with travel and juggling all of that, but knitting has really helped me ground myself and relieve stress as I'm doing all of this. And I really knit all the time. As you can see in this photo, I knit during competitions, when I'm in class. Everyone I know has a pair of hand knit socks, and if you don't have one, you're gonna get one soon. I had to do an outfit change. This is one of my favorite creations. Probably the greatest thing I've ever accomplished. This is my polar bear sweater, so I thought I had to wear it for this presentation. So Velshana always pushes us to study what we're interested in, and research something that is really impactful in our life. So of course, after I got the job, thankfully, she pushed me to research handcrafts and knitting and connect that with neuroscience. And I very immediately found that so many people around the world had the same impact when they started a handcraft. This is just one example, but a recent study of 3.5 thousand people found that 80% of people that started knitting were more calm, happy, and less stressed. And I think this is a state of mind we all strive towards. This study was particularly about knitting, but other forms of handcrafts had a similar effect. So to understand how handcrafts are having this impact on how we deal with stress, we have to understand the stress system. So I went a little, if you guys were here previously in the day for the resiliency talk, we talked a little bit about the nervous system, but I'm going to go a little more in depth here. So stick with me. So I'm sure all of you have experienced stress before. Life is stressful. If you imagine a bear started chasing you, just like in that picture, It would be how you feel, your heart would start beating, palms would get sweaty. You'd probably only be able to think about survival and getting out of there. And this is your stress response turning on. Our stress response is turned on all the time during the day. You probably aren't getting chased by a bear, hopefully, but it's turned on when you're sitting in traffic, when you're trying to figure out what you're going to eat for dinner. That can be stressful for some people. If you have a presentation, and then all the way to things like a divorce or abuse, or wondering where your next meal is going to come from. So all of these things activate the same stress response. And once this stress response is activated, it has two different facets. It has the nervous system and the endocrine system. You probably aren't thinking about everything that's going on inside of you when you're stressed, but it's definitely not in your brain. There is huge physiological changes occurring, and we're going to get a little more in depth. So first off is the nervous system. This is called the fight, flight, fawn, freeze response, or the sympathetic nervous system response. And what the nervous system's job is largely in the stress response is determining, okay, do I need to turn on the rest of this stress response? So your brain takes in everything that you're experiencing, what you're seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, and it understands it in the context of your experiences previously. And taking all this into consideration, it says, okay, is this a negative situation? Is this dangerous? Do I need to be stressed? And if the stress response is turned on, the nervous system has a couple of immediate effects on your body. It increases your heart rate, increases your blood pressure, and it inhibits area of the brain right up here, involved with decision making and logical thinking. Okay, so if the nervous system does say, okay, this is dangerous, it activates the endocrine response. And in the endocrine response, some key molecules that are released are cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Those last two are also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. And those two are released in your blood, and they have huge impacts on your physiology. And all these changes are working to help you survive this stressor. So I have a list there, but I won't go into detail. I just wanted to highlight the last one, the suppression of the immune system. This doesn't happen in an acute scenario, but this happens if the stress response is activated for a long time, chronically, then you can start to see this suppression of the immune system. Okay, so there are different levels of stress that we can experience: acute, tolerable, and toxic. And in all these cases, the same stress response is activated with the nervous and endocrine system. What really changes between the three, I like to explain with a teeter-totter or balance. Our body is usually in homeostatic balance of normal brain and body functioning. However, when we experience a stressor, it starts to tip that scale to one side. When this stressor is acute or only for a short period of time, once the stressor goes away, we're able to bounce back to that normal functioning. What we see in tolerable is when this stressor is activated for longer. So this might be something more serious like a divorce, and your stress response might be turned on for longer. So that the scale might be tipped a little farther, but you have supportive relationships, you have a healthy brain foundation, you have positive coping strategies that put weight on this other side of the balance so you can get back to that range. It is then where we see toxic stress. And this is when the scale is tipped because the activation of the stress system happens for a prolonged period of time. So this could be something like coming home every day to abuse in your household or experiencing community violence. If you're experiencing this every day, your stress response is activated for a prolonged period of time. And in the case of toxic stress, you often don't have those supportive relationships or that healthy brain that is able to bounce back after this, and you are stuck in this unbalanced state. It is in this case where we do start to see effects on the brain and body that can have real big implications. So, how do we protect against toxic stress? One of the ways that is really important to protect against toxic stress and that can help to put weight on that other side of the scale and help to put your body back into that normal functioning is the relaxation response, also called the parasympathetic response. So there's a lot of words that I'm throwing at you. So I use this analogy. It helped me when I first learned them, so I hope it can help you as well. So if we remember the sympathetic nervous system response, that was the stress response, but this is the parasympathetic response. So I like to think of a parachute floating down and putting the brakes on that stress system. So it is exactly what its name sounds like, the relaxation response. This is when you are reading a book, eating a meal. It really has the opposite effects on your body as the stress response does. So it reduces your breathing rate, reduces your heart rate, promotes digestion. And as I said previously, this parasympathetic response works to put weight on this other side of the scale so that you are able to bounce back once you encounter a stressor. So now we are finally getting to the handcrafts part. So handcrafts actually do so many wonderful things to build a strong brain structure and help protect you against toxic stress. And one of the ways that it does this is through activating this relaxation response. So many handcrafts are quite rhythmic or repetitive, and this actually induces a flow state. And I think this is a really cool fun fact, but humans gravitate towards this rhythmic element because when we were in the womb, we had our mom's heartbeat going and we found this relaxing. So as we grow up, we still gravitate towards this rhythmic, repetitive motion. And this is part of the reason why we find handcrafts so relaxing and we are able to get into this flow state. So flow state, what does that mean? It is being completely absorbed in a craft, having an inward focus. This is me when I sit down and start knitting and I'm not thinking about anything else and I can knit for hours and hours. This is what I would do on the airplane all the time when I was traveling. And this flow state activates the parasympathetic or relaxation response, and you are helping to counter this stress response and protect yourself from toxic stress. Okay, so another wonderful way that you can help to protect your brain with this flow state is mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? It is bringing an awareness to the moment without judgment. My mind immediately goes to meditation or something like that, but there's a lot of different ways to practice mindfulness, going for a walk outside, taking deep breaths, and doing handcrafts. So mindfulness has so many benefits. Daily practice of mindfulness improves emotional regulation, enhances attention, and increases self-awareness. So this is the brain. Tahira made this image. It's beautiful, but you by no means need to memorize any of this. I just wanted to show all the different areas that are activated while you are in this flow state and you are experiencing this mindfulness. And all these regions of the brain are involved with attention control, self-awareness, and emotional regulation. And by activating them, you are really strengthening them. And another way that handcrafts can help to build a strong brain that is resilient to stress is through cognitive stimulation. So you are not just doing your craft, your brain is working in so many other ways. It's planning, it's setting goals, it's problem solving. I am constantly having a knitting crisis. I was texting my mom like an hour ago about figuring out how to fix my knitting. So it's constantly trying to figure out problems, and you're also coordinating precise movement with your fingers, depending on what craft you love to do. And so when you're doing all of this, you are activating different areas of your brain and strengthening the connections within the brain. And it's almost like you're exercising your brain. You're really working it. And this has so many benefits in the short and in the long term. So in the short term, it's associated with cognitive and memory improvements. And in the long term, which is really, really cool and impactful, it can help protect against later life cognitive decline, such as Alzheimer's. Okay, and so when you are doing your handcraft, you are also creating a concrete creative result. And this is associated with a boost in self-esteem, a boost in confidence. You're given a sense of control. I don't know about you, when I finish a project that I'm working on, it feels amazing. It feels amazing to be able to wear it and use it every day. And science supports this. So when you do create a concrete creative result, you are releasing a chemical called dopamine. So dopamine is a messenger within your brain, and when it's released, it helps us to learn and build habits. So when you are knitting or doing whatever craft you love, it truly is addicting. You do want to do it continually. And this is why, through the release of dopamine. But dopamine has a lot of other benefits other than just helping us learn. It is associated with increase in well-being, such as a reduction in anxiety and depression. And it can help boost our self-esteem and confidence, just how I was mentioning earlier. So when you are doing your craft, you're building a habit that improves your confidence and improves your well-being. Okay, and finally, this is my favorite slide, and knitting has been so impactful for me in building community. I added a couple images of me, my family, and my friends. So at the bottom two photos, that is me with my grandma and my mom. They are both huge knitters, and knitting has been a great way for me to connect with them. They live all the way in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So I don't get to see them as much as I would like to, but we are constantly sending each other patterns. I'm asking them for help. So it's a really great way to stay in touch. And then more recently, and I think both of these girls are also on the call, which is wonderful, I have been able to share this love with some friends. I started with both of these girls, the Notre Dame fencing knitting club, which is very niche, but it has been wonderful to knit and crochet with them and share this love. And we meet up every week, and it's just been a really great way to relax at the end of the week. So knitting and other handcrafts really allow you to connect with people through common interest. And as we've talked about so much today, having people in your life that you can rely on and having this social support is so important to bouncing back when you face these stressors and being able to tip that scale back to that normal functioning. It is associated with improvements in both mental and physical health. So finally, when I started knitting, I had no idea all the benefits that were going on. I just knew I loved it. So I hope that I have shared some insights with you, and doing your craft is more than just crafting. You are really helping to build a resilient, healthy, and strong brain. And it does all of this through the induction of the relaxation response when you're in this flow state. And this helps to counter the stress response and tip that scale back. It increases mindfulness also through this flow state. it instills a sense of purpose and confidence, and you have a habit. So you want to continue doing this and continue instilling this sense of purpose and confidence. It improves cognitive functioning and memory through exercising your brain. And then finally, it helps you to build a supportive community of people who have a common interest. And this supportive community can help pick you up and help you navigate these stressors when they come up in your life. Questions?
I just want to say thank you. I have a couple of people who I know are crafters and do all sorts of things. I have a niece that does all the things, an amazing artist. Do you think that what you talked about as far as the benefits, do you think that also connects with cooking, people who love to cook?
I think cooking is definitely an art form. I mean, you get creative while you're doing it. You're using your hands. You're thinking about what you're doing. So I 100% think that it is a handcraft.
Yes. And Tyler, I see your hand. And I do want you to know Jane will be doing this presentation alongside Karina and I in a couple of library events coming up. And we're hoping to partner with Elkhart Public Library as well. Tyler?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, and you see some people are like, how can we take orders? Where are my socks? Tyler, go ahead.
I was gonna ask about like musical instruments. Would this fall under this? Like, I mean, it's not a handcraft, but would it fall under kind of like entering into this flow state?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Musical instruments like playing guitar or piano or something like that. Would that fall under like this rhythmic flow state sort of category?
Yes, I 100% think so. I did music, but I was quite bad. So it's not my thing, but I definitely think music would put you into this flow state that would have similar benefits.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
What about dance?
Yeah, I for sure think that it could also apply. I mean, I'm sure it's a physical activity as well, so there would be benefits in that realm. I'm not really putting on a sweat while I'm knitting, but well, sometimes. But so I think there'd be benefits in that category as well, but 100% I think aspects of the flow state would apply to dance and other sports.
Yay.
Also, we can just put up here the different locations and dates and times of the Handcrafts and the Brain Workshop, which we're going to be doing in the community. So please share with everyone, check them out. I'm really excited to continue sharing this.
But we will have to follow up with, do you take orders? I think right now with your travel, that either can hurt or harm because you're on the plane more. So I think that's something you should think about, and we'll get in touch with you, owner who asked that question. So one of the things that I want to say is the silent auction has closed. And so now, remember, everybody, we keep saying it is a fundraiser. We thank you all for this time together. Jane, again, I love that you said, save the best for last. I think encouraging people to have a hobby, to take time to do something that can help our brains and have well-being, and all of the gifts that you offered us today is such a wonderful way to close out. And so we are going to have our thank you soon. So if you want to just pop over. All right. We are at our last little spot. We thank you all for being here. Some of you all have been on a long time with us, and we are so happy. I have to start, and then Jan is going to say something, but thank you to the team. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You all are fabulous. This is how I have the energy. I feel like it's just going to keep me young. Thank y'all for sharing that wonderfulness with me. And so, again, this has been exciting. Jan is going to say something, and then we're just going to open it up for all of our exec committees to give the final thank yous. And yeah, all right.
Okay. Can you hear me? Great. So we'd want to thank everybody for jumping on Velshana's vision. And we're so grateful for our fearless leader. Velshana, we love you and we appreciate you. We have a great team because we have a great leader. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I am on to tell you what our goal is so far. So we have the opportunity to leave Give Grow open. And so we're going to do that. But at the 11th hour, our total is $8,949 with over $1,879 with silent auction. So thank you all for all of your donations. Yeah, so exciting. So we still have plenty of opportunity for people to partner with us, to sponsor us, to donate. And so we're going to leave it open for a little while longer, but we are excited and we celebrate what has been done today. So thank you. I see that, Ray. Thank you. Woo! I agree. So.
I'm just going to take an opportunity. Nobody else unmuted. So I echo everything that Jan said. Just it's been an incredible day. Oh my goodness. The vision and the effort that everybody put in. Velshana, the vision, right? I remember the first time you were like, we're going to have a Zoomathon. And I was like, a Zoomathon, like a telethon? You were like, yeah. I was like, okay. And Karina was like, what's a telethon? And right, it just all of the work. I mean, and then it just happened, right? Like, and then it was just there, right? And the ways in which you make all of this really, really hard stuff seem so easy and so streamlined and flawless. I am the team. I'm blown away by you guys. This has just been, I mean, thank you. It's been an incredible day. And had you said to me 2 years ago that this is where it would be, I would have probably been like, right? Like, come on now. But oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you guys so much for turning this idea into a reality. It was like I texted Velshana earlier today. It's like that's what today is. It's like we started the day with the book. What do you do with an idea? And it was like suddenly it goes from being here, I'm gonna cry, to being everywhere. And like that's what this day has been. And so thank you guys so much for all of your hard work. We wouldn't be here without you. So thanks.
Just want to echo that celebration, right? Gratitude, interdependence. Those are some of the themes of the day. And my goodness, look at these beautiful faces. So many wise voices of all different ages and backgrounds and life goals and handcrafting skills. I mean, it was just fun, right? It was just fun and beautiful and hard at the same time. To hear about the importance of this work, right? But to see it spread, to see the screen grow, to see faces come in and out, and to know that we're all smarter, right? And we're all more connected today than we were this morning, right? Just takes that invitation to set the table, to set the screen, right? And invite folks in wherever they are to participate in the conversation. So just incredibly grateful as a member of the board, the executive board for Self-Healing Communities, to take it out of the boardroom and into the world, right? And to invite folks into that conversation. So Velshana, team, you guys rocked it. I heard gratitude all day. You practice what you preach. And just from me to you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep it going.
I would just add as an executive committee member how thankful I am for everything that everybody has done for the day, and to pass along a special thank you to people who donated items for the silent auction, people who donated. The ultimate goal of today was to raise awareness and to help people understand, but also to help raise some dollars to fulfill our mission. And so for all of the people who gave of their treasure or of their talents in ways that made things available for people to bid on, I would say thank you, and let's keep this momentum going.